now and evermore. Praise the Father, Son, and Spirit. You know the Lord liveth, and blessed be the rock of God of my salvation. Be exalted. You know the Lord liveth, and blessed be the rock of God of my salvation. Be exalted. You know the Lord liveth, and blessed be the rock of God of my salvation. Be exalted. You know the Lord liveth, and blessed be the rock of God of my salvation. Be exalted. I will call on the Lord. All right, man. This next song is called Home in Heaven. We have the verse for you guys. It's kind of a call and response song. And so. I've got a home. I've got a home. I've got a crown. I've got a crown. I've got a love. I've got a love. Won't let me down. Won't let me down. I've got a home. I've got a home. I've got a prize. I've got a prize. He'll wipe away. He'll wipe away tears from my eyes. Tears from my eyes. In heaven. In heaven. I've got a home in heaven. In heaven. In heaven. I've got a home in heaven. I've got a home. I've got a home. I once was lost. I once was lost. Jesus, He found me. Jesus, He found me. His blood on the cross. Blood on the cross. I've got a home. I've got a home. I get to share. I get to share. I've got a promise. I've got a promise. And I'll see you there. I'll see you there. In heaven. In heaven. I've got a home in heaven. I've got a home in heaven. I've got a home in heaven. In heaven. In heaven. I've got a home 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 in heaven. Amen. Amen. We appreciate that we got sister churches. We can get some help when our worship leaders are out of town. Real quick, before we get into the lesson, just want to share our announcements. And a lot of us are going to be out of town over the next couple weeks. It's going to be great. Just a reminder, the women's retreat is next weekend. If you haven't signed up, it's still not too late for the women's retreat. Men, it is too late for our men's retreat. But that is happening next weekend. So please don't forget. The men are having their retreat the following weekend. And we will be having services here both weekends. So if you're in town, still come to service. We're going to be doing that. And then lastly, what I want to announce for actually our first time is our Women's Day. So we're going to be having a Women's Day on April 9th. It's going to be at 3:30 at White Dove Coffee. That is right there off of 4th, kind of back.
It's on the 7th,
7th and 4th, yeah. And so it's going to be a great time. We're working on getting a speaker for that. It's going to be $10 for a ticket. And the great thing is we're getting it after hours, but there's going to be a barista still there. So if you want to order yourself coffee, you'll have to get it yourself. But you can get their coffee, which is pretty neat. So
Put it on your calendar, Saturday, April 9th. You guys are going to have a great time just hanging out and really having some great spiritual conversations. So let's start our lesson, and we're going to start with a video. Maybe we'll start with the video.
Give me a second.
Here's the video.
Mary pancakes I'll have for me.
You get those, and I'm gonna get the
But I want
frittata.
turkey breast Benedict. Fruit plate, I'm getting that.
Peter.
I'll do the frittata.
Okay, I would like the frittata, and you get the Mary pancakes, okay?
Okay, why don't we do this? Why don't we get, I don't know what I want.
I hate how indecisive you're getting.
I'm not indecisive, I
Yes,
just
you
can't
are.
decide.
Peter, I want you to want something.
The breakfast burger.
Great.
And the pancakes.
No, I'm done with this. I'm just gonna be honest with you. It's just such a turn when you do this.
This?
Okay? You're freezing, I'm gonna go to the car and get my jacket. When I come back, you better decide in your order. Okay? Figure it out.
She's not really mad. It's when in relationships, when you're together a long time, you have your own volume and language that it sounds to strangers like it's heated in it. That's just a common, that happens when we, that's just anytime.
So, just a reminder, we have been going through our series All In. And that's kind of been our series. And brief recap, our first week, we looked at how being all in is really the key to success. And then we looked at how being all in is not just the key to success, but also the key to happiness. And so we looked at Elisha with that one. The first one we looked at King Asa. And then last week, we looked at being all in is really a measure of our love. And we looked at Solomon and how he started off great, but kind of towards the end of his life, he really lost his love and lost the nature of being all in. And so today, we're going to look at a passage where people are called to make a decision to go all in. And going all in, or even just deciding on anything, is a challenge. Right? And I think we can get annoyed. I mean, you watch that video, you can get frustrated when people aren't able to just make the decision. Like, what are you going to order for breakfast? And I think that's so culturally normal that, like, wow, it's so easy to get frustrated when somebody else can't make a decision. But I want to talk about, are you making decisions in your life? And hopefully God isn't frustrated as that guy's wife was, but I think there's still that plea from God of, you need to make a decision. And so our title is The Crossroads of Destiny. So let's say a prayer, and then we'll really dig on in. God, thank you so much just for, I think, for your scriptures, for your guidance, for your love, for helping us, and helping us over and over and over again to choose you, to choose to go all in. God, we are so grateful that, the one decision of not going all in, or maybe many decisions in our life of not going all in, you haven't struck us down. You haven't sent us on our way, but you have allowed us to repent. You have allowed us to choose to come back and make a decision to be all in for you. God, I pray that right now we can have humble hearts and listen for ourselves. What are the areas I need to go all in my faith? God, please be with us. Let us hear your scriptures clearly and have a great rest of our service. In Jesus' name I pray. Amen. Amen. So we're going to be talking about Elijah, and in the time period where he is on the scene, I mean, things are are pretty messed up. It's a time period where there's a lot of wickedness happening, a lot of idolatry, and the leader of all of this is the king and the queen, Ahab and Jezebel. So let's read in 1 Kings 16. We're going to spend most of our day today, naturally, chapter 18. But here it gives us some insight into how bad Ahab and Jezebel are.
All right.
It says, in the 38th year of Asa, king of Judah, Ahab, son of Omri, became king of Israel. And he reigned in Samaria over Israel 22 years. And these 22 years, I feel like, might have the most content in any 22-year period in the Bible, just because of how bad King Asa was. Verse 30, Ahab, son of Omri, did more evil in the eyes of the Lord than any of those before him. He not only considered it trivial to commit the sins of Jeroboam, son of Nebat, but he also married Jezebel, daughter of the king of the Sidonians, and began to serve Baal and worship him. He set up an altar for Baal in the temple of Baal that he built in Samaria. Ahab also made an Asherah pole and did more to arouse the anger of the Lord, the God of Israel, than did all the kings of Israel before him. And so here we get a picture that King Ahab is not a good guy. He's not the person, he's like, you know what? Everything you did that was messed up, that's nothing. I'm going well above and beyond what you guys have done in my sin. And then, we don't get a lot about his wife here, but he marries Jezebel. And, you go throughout the Bible, and there are some bad women and bad men along the way. And even some of those people, we still name our kids after them. Or you hear those names in society. Jezebel is not one of those names you hear. And I think it's not just to do with maybe the weirdness of the name, but also what she did and who she was. And so at this time of great, I guess in a sense, anger from the Lord, one of the greatest prophets arises, Elijah. And it's so interesting because when there are evil times in society, great men and women start to rise up as well.
Yes.
Dark times reveal Elijahs. And I think perhaps we have also been called to be an Elijah in this dark time. And so one of the things Elijah does is he prays, and there becomes a great drought in the land. Right? And you read about that. I think Jesus references it. It's referenced in James chapter 5. There's a 3.5-year long drought in the society. And as you think about it, if there's a drought for 3.5 years, and you are the king, put yourself in his shoes for a little bit. The pressure is probably building immensely on him. Like, he is ruling all these people and supposed to be the one taking care of them. And now there's been a drought for 3.5 years. Probably a lot of stress going on in his life. A lot of pressure, anxiety. And when pressure builds up long enough, an explosion usually happens. A clash of good and evil are about to take place. And we're going to call this the Crossroads. So let's jump into chapter 18 of 1 Kings. I don't have the scripture's up on the screen, so if you got a Bible, flip on over there. And I'm going to read verse 1 and 2 to get a little bit more of the backstory, and then we'll jump down to verse 16.
All right.
So that after a long time, in the 3rd year, the word of the Lord came to Elijah. Go and present yourself to King Ahab, and I will send rain on the land. So Elijah went to present himself to Ahab. And then down in verse 16. So Obadiah went to meet Ahab and told him, and Ahab went to meet Elijah. So Obadiah was the middleman there for a little bit. When he saw Elijah, he said to him, "Is that you, you troubler of Israel?" "I have not made trouble for Israel," Elijah replied, "but you and your father's family have. You have abandoned the Lord's command and have followed the Baals. Now summon the people from all over Israel to meet me on Mount Carmel, and bring the 450 prophets of Baal, and the 400 prophets of Asherah, who eat at Jezebel's table." So Ahab sent word throughout all Israel and assembled the prophets on Mount Carmel. Ahab here, he blames all the trouble on the spiritual man. We got a term now, gaslighting. And that's exactly what's happening here. Ahab is fully gaslighting Elijah. Right? He's manipulating. He's trying to flip the script. He's trying to have kind of Elijah question his own reality. Because technically Elijah did pray for the rain to stop. But Elijah comes back and he doesn't stand for that. He goes, no. The blame is on you. The blame is on your sin, your family's sin. And one of the things we have to do as Christians, because there's going to be times where people try to flip the script on us. There are going to be times where people try to gaslight you. And as Christians, we have to take a stand for our spirituality, for our faith. People are going to say you're narrow-minded. You're intolerant. You're uncaring. And they can go on and on and on about maybe what they've experienced and try to say, hey, this is who you are. We have to say, no, that's not who we are. The sin in the world, the sin back at this time, the king's sin is what's causing the trouble in our society. And if we deal with the sin, the blessings will flow again. It's so interesting. We're going to keep on reading, but Ahab, we just see his kind of weak character here. We see that he's, in many ways, kind of just a pushover. Because it's so interesting. He blames the prophet. And then the prophet just tells him, hey, you need to do this, this, and this. And the king just obeys. He's like, all right, well, you told me to gather the prophet, or gather the prophets of Baal. All right, I'll do it. And it's just so interesting to see that dynamic. I just say that, we can say, hey, this is what the truth is. And so let's dig on in. Let's keep going. Verse 21. We start to see the problem. Elijah went before the people and said, how long will you waver between two opinions? If the Lord is God, follow him. But if Baal is God, follow him. But the people said nothing. That line from the scripture, that is like a full-on picture of not being all in. right? Not being committed, not taking a stand. They chose to play it safe. They chose to say, hey, let's worship Baal and God. Why not do both? God, we know, hates this. Right? You read in Revelation, right? He's going to spit the lukewarm people out of his mouth. For us, do we fall into the same trap? Right? Where we want to follow God plus blank. God plus blank. What could be your blank? Maybe God plus pornography. God plus something else God has strictly said no to. Maybe it's God plus your desire or your independence. Or God plus comfort and convenience. What do you try to add in and worship as well with God? Imagine how amazing this sermon series would have been if we entitled it Somewhat All In. Or Almost All In. It just wouldn't work. And I think we can all agree, that's not God's way. And so Elijah offers a proposal to all the people of Israel. And we get that in verse 22 through 26. We're working our way through the passage this morning. Then Elijah said to them, I am the only one of the Lord's prophets left. But Baal has 450 prophets. Get 2 bulls for us, and let Baal's prophets choose one for themselves. Let them cut it into pieces and put it on the wood and not set fire to it. I will prepare the other bull and put it on the wood and not set fire to it. Then you call on the name of your God, and I will call on the name of the Lord. The God who answers by fire, he is God. Then all the people said, what you say is good. Elijah said to the prophets of Baal, choose one of the bulls and prepare it first. Since there is so many of you, call on the name of your God, but do not light the fire. So they took the bull given to them and prepared it. They called on the name of Baal from morning to noon. Baal, answer us, they shouted. But there was no response. No one answered. And they danced around the altar they had made. It's so interesting because they're like, this proposal sounds good. They might be competitive like me. And they want to win. And the reason it sounds so good, especially for the god Baal, is he's actually the god, or supposed to be the god, of fire and rain. Which is really interesting, because he's failed to produce rain for the past 3.5 years. Will he be able to produce fire? So, all right, this is the God. He should be able to do it. And Elijah's like, I got him right where I want him. It's a trap. And so, let's keep going. Let's look at what happens. Right there, dancing around the altar. In verse 27, it says, about noon, Elijah begins to taunt them. Shout louder, he said. Surely he is a god. Perhaps he's in deep thought. Or busy. Maybe he's traveling for spring break. Maybe he is sleeping and must be awakened. So they shout louder and slash themselves with swords and spears, as was their custom, until their blood flowed. Midday passed, and the 450 continued their frantic prophesying until the time for the evening sacrifice. But there was no response. No one answered. No one paid attention. So we see Baal really being exposed as an imposter, exposed as a false god who couldn't produce rain for the past 3.5 years, and he doesn't produce fire at this crossroads. So let's keep going. Verse 30 says, Then Elijah said to all the people, Come here to me. They came to him, and he repaired the altar of the Lord, which had been torn down. Elijah took 12 stones, one for each of the tribes descended from Jacob, to whom the word of the Lord had come, saying, your name shall be Israel. With the stones he built an altar in the name of the Lord. And he dug a trench around it, large enough to hold 2 seahs of seed. He arranged the wood, cut the bull into pieces, and laid it on the wood. Then he said to them, Fill 4 large jars with water, and pour it on the offering and on the wood. Do it again, he said, and they did it again. Do it a 3rd time, he ordered, and they did it a 3rd time. The water ran down around the altar and filled the trench. At the time of the sacrifice, the prophet Elijah stepped forward and prayed, Lord, the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Israel, let it be known today that you are God in Israel, and that I am your servant and have done all these things at your command. Answer me, Lord, answer me, so these people will know that you, Lord, are God, and that you are turning their hearts back again. Then the fire of the Lord fell and burned up the sacrifice, the wood, the stones, and the soil, and also licked up the water in the trench. This is Elijah's call back to God for the people. He's like a showman as well. He's really building the tension up of what's going on. He rebuilds the altar from the patriarchs. Right? There was already an altar here. And he takes the time to rebuild it, which is, I think, encouraging for many of us, because I think it shows that there was still something of faith as a remnant there. If you might not be all in at this moment, there's a remnant of faith that you can go back to and you can build from. And that's what he does. He builds up from it. And in the new altar, there's 12 stones. He ties it into the 12 tribes. And he does 4 buckets of water 3 times, 12. And it's really the symbol to the people that, hey, it's not just about one of us being all in. It's not just about, Preston being all in, Rachel. It's about all of us being all in. It's about the society. It's about the community being all in. And then, completely opposite of the other prophets, he prays for maybe 20 seconds. Maybe. I read it kind of slowly, and that might have been 20 seconds. They prayed all day, and then kaboom. Fire from God burns everything up. I even like that it says it burn the soil up. Like, how does that even work? I get the water, I get the wood, it burned the soil. Just showing that, all right, who's the real God? And so let's look at the aftermath. Let's look at, all right, what happens from here on out? Verse 39. When the people saw this, they fell prostrate and cried, "The Lord, He is God. The Lord, He is God." Then Elijah commanded them, "Seize the prophets of Baal. Don't let anyone get away." They seized them. And Elijah brought them down to the Kishon Valley and slaughtered it. And Elijah said to Ahab, "Go eat and drink, for there is a sound of heavy rain." So Ahab went off to eat and drink, but Elijah climbed to the top of Carmel, bent down to the ground, and put his face between his knees. Seize the prophets. Don't let anyone get away. And then they go on and slaughter them. That sounds and is an extreme punishment. But ultimately, that's the penalty for idolatry. That's a penalty that was written about before this time. So they knew. And, they didn't get everybody, but they got, especially the ones who promoted the idolatry, were punished. This kind of intensity isn't just an Old Testament thing. Jesus, in the Sermon on the Mount, which is probably a series we'll do at some point here soon, tells us, when there's sin in your life or something's causing you to sin, cut it out. Cut it. And he's talking about your eye. If your eye is causing you to sin, cut it out. That this intensity of idolatry, this intensity of, get idolatry out of your life, still applies to us today. They have a dramatic heart change. They say, wow, God is God. He is the Lord. And it brought about change. Because that's what should happen when your hearts change. It brings about action change as well. Question for us is, are we taking idolatry in our life seriously? Are you taking ways, or your God plus X, are you taking that seriously? Because the scriptures very much do. And what's so amazing is, as they repent, as they turn back to God, as they get rid of the idolaters, especially those who promote it, the rain finally comes back. The blessings start to flow. I want you to imagine, for your life, what could happen if you decided to be all in for God and chose to stop wavering in an indecision? I'll tell you what, you will overcome sin. You're overcoming. You will help somebody become a disciple of Jesus. As we looked at before, you will have more joy and success defined by God than any other path you take. That'll happen. Think about your life 6 months from now, having overcome that sin, having gone all in. It's an exciting thought process. It's an exciting exercise to do. It's hard to do it sometimes thinking about this next week, because in the moment it's more difficult to see success. But 6 months from now, anything can happen. God can do miracles. But it starts with a decision. It starts with you no longer wavering on whatever decision you have to make to be all in. For you, it might be you're wavering on becoming open about your sin. You know, you've been slightly wanting to know He's probably good for you, but fearful to do it. Maybe you've been wavering on giving fully financially, or maybe having full and true forgiveness. Maybe you've been wavering about just your commitment to God in general. Maybe you've been riding the fence on, you know what, I'm thinking about becoming a Christian. I'm thinking about becoming a disciple or getting baptized, and you've just been wavering. You've been sitting there thinking, you know what, is this the right time? Am I ready? Go for it. What's holding you back from an incredible life where we get to worship a God who totally schooled this other God in this competition? Personally, I like winning. This is all side notes, not on my notes now. I like winning. Why not be on the winning team? Action is expected here by the prophet. He expects the people, as they turn to God, to take action. He says, hey, seize all. Don't let any get away. And as we conclude this sermon series, action is expected. We're at a crossroads, and you can choose whether to be all in or stay somewhat in, or mostly all in. Action is expected. And so what I want to do right now is I want us to take just 20 seconds. We're going to take 20 seconds, and I want you to just pray to yourself. Silent prayer about what area you are no longer going to waver. What area you're going to go all in. And then, if you have some extra time, think about this week. What are the actions that follow those decisions? So let's take that 20 seconds and then I'll conclude. Amen. We are called and need to be all in. We look at the fact that, being all in, it's the secret to success. That is the key to happiness. And it's the measure of our love to God. Now let's decide today to no longer waver, to go all in, and this week, live out that change that you just prayed for. Amen. Amen.
And as we prepare communion, we'll sing a song called Lead Me to Calvary. King of my life, I crown thee now. Thine shall the glory Lead me to Calvary, lest I forget Gethsemane, lest I forget thy agony, lest I forget thy love for me. Lead me to Calvary. Show me the tomb where thou wast laid, tenderly mourned and wept. Angels and robes of light array guarded thee whilst thou slept. Lest I forget Gethsemane, lest I forget thine agony, lest I forget thy love for me. Lead me to Calvary. Let me lie buried through the moon, come with a gift to thee. Show to me now the empty tomb, lead me to Calvary. Lest I forget Gethsemane, lest I forget thine agony, lest I forget thy love for me. Lead me to Calvary. May I be willing, Lord, to bear daily my cross for thee. Even thy cup of grief to share, thou hast borne all for me. Lest I forget Gethsemane, lest I forget thine agony, lest I forget thy love for me. Lead me to Calvary.
Morning, everyone. So I'm Abby, if you don't know who I am. I'm Brian's wife, but I have the pleasure of sharing today for communion. And so in the spirit of the All In series, I thought it was appropriate to share just, Jesus is the one who went all in the biggest sense, for us to be able to redeem us. And that process was a gruesome one. And so he knew, he had an idea of what was coming into that. But I wanted to go over to Luke 9, and it's Luke 9:51. And so throughout, up until this point, Jesus has been preaching, but this is kind of the turn in the gospel where he sets out for Jerusalem. And so it says in verse 51, it says, as the time approached for him to be taken up to heaven, Jesus resolutely set out for Jerusalem. And he sent messengers on ahead who went into a Samaritan village to get things ready for him. But the people there did not welcome him because he was heading for Jerusalem. When the disciples, James and John, saw this, they asked, Lord, what do you want us to do, to call fire down from heaven and to destroy them? But Jesus turned and rebuked them. He and his disciples went on to another village. And so with this, he has his sights set on Jerusalem. He knows exactly what's going to happen. That's where he's about to be. He will be crucified. And I love that Jesus resolutely set out. I think about, like, you think of somebody who's going to resolutely do something. Their mind is set. I think maybe about like a 3-year-old or a 4-year-old who has their mind set on, like, I'm getting ice cream today. Nothing in their mind is going to set them aside from doing that. I think that's probably the most stubborn person I can think of right now. But I think about even with Jesus, like, nothing was going to deter him from going and completing what he was set to do. And then even looking at, like, okay, so he makes this resolute decision to go all in and immediately faces opposition as he tries to do this. And he continues on with his path. And then I want to go over to another scene with Jesus on the Mount of Olives. And it's in Luke 22, and we'll start in verse 41. He went up to the Mount of Olives and he's praying. He's praying and his disciples are with him. Verse 41. He withdrew for about a stone's throw beyond them, knelt down and prayed. Father, if you are willing, take this cup from me. Yet not my will, but yours be done. An angel from heaven appeared to him and strengthened him. And being in anguish, he prayed more earnestly. And his sweat was like drops of blood falling to the ground. And you can see that even in his resolute decision, there was struggle, there was pain, there was anguish. He knew what was about to happen, but continued to go all in for our sake. We know that because he did go to the cross. He was crucified and resurrected so that we could have new life. I want, as we take communion today, to reflect on, like, Jesus is not only calling us all in because that's what he's calling us to do, but he was the one who first did it for us, so we can today. Dear God, thank you just for this time to be able to gather. I pray that as we're making decisions to really change different things in our lives, to go all in, to reevaluate our relationship with you, to continue to follow you, God, that we can do so in the spirit of just full all-inness, the resolute spirit, in the same way that you did for us. God, I pray that we can look to you as an example of really how to follow you, God, and I pray that just this morning we can really feel your love and your peace as we take communion. In Jesus' name I pray. Amen.
Amen. Thanks, Abby, for sharing communion. Brian, for a great lesson. Thanks, Kevin, for coming out to help us worship. We're just going to take a few minutes to give back to God financially. A lot of us give online. If you're visiting, you pass the trays, or if you don't give online, you pass the trays for that. God was all in for us when He gave us Jesus, right? And Jesus sacrificed Himself, so He was all in. How you think about how can we be all in for Him, financially, giving back to Him, and how we support the church and functions here. That's what we try to do with our finances. So along with that, also some of you heard that Nick's mom is taken over the worst. She's in the hospital in Mexico, so we're praying for her along with Morning, God, we're thankful that you are all in for us, that you give us more than we need, that we are so blessed in this country that we take care of you in so many ways. But as we give back to you, help us to really be focused on how we can do all in for you. And also, this morning we pray for Nick's mom. She's in the hospital, just to be able to get to a better spot, to be able to make a turn for the better. I know she's been really struggling with being ill. And pray that you be with her and with Nick and the families there, and just help them to be at peace, help them to trust in you, that you are in control and you take care of things. We pray for her health to get better. God, help us to have a great rest of the day. Love you. Praise Jesus. Okay, we're going to finish out with one more song and then we'll be dismissed.
Everyone stand. We're going to sing a song called Hold to God's Unchanging Hand.
Time is filled with transition, not a earthly roof can stand. Build your hopes on things eternal, hold to God's unchanging hand. You gotta hold to his hand, to God's unchanging hand. Come on now, hold to his hand, to God's unchanging hand. Build your hopes on things eternal, hold to God's unchanging hand. Trust in him who will not leave you, whatsoever years may bring. When your earthly friends forsake you, still more closely to him cling. You gotta hold to his hand, to God's unchanging hand. Hold to his hand, to God's unchanging hand. Build your hopes on things eternal. Hold to God's unchanging hand. Covet not this world's good riches that so rapidly decay. Seek to gain the heavenly treasures, they will never pass away. You gotta hold to his hand, to God's unchanging hand. Come on now, hold to his hand, to God's unchanging hand. Build your hopes on things eternal. Hold to God's unchanging hand. When your journey is completed, if to God you have been true, fair and bright the home in glory, your enraptured soul will view. You gotta hold to his hand, to God's unchanging hand. Hold to his hand, to God's unchanging hand. Build your hopes on things eternal. Hold to God's unchanging hand. Amen. How's this one?